Hi, everybody. Welcome to another novoflex webinar. I'm here with my dear friends, someone whose photography and teaching I've always admired, and his writings. He's also an author, and is also my business partner at National Parks at Night. Please join me in welcoming Lance Keimig. Lance, welcome to the novoflex webinar series.
Thanks so much, Matt. So thanks for having me, and thanks to novoflex for having me as well. I'm excited today to talk to you about one of my favorite subjects and topics with regard to night photography, and that's adding supplemental light sources, um, you know, widely known as light painting. Um, And specifically, one of the more challenging types of light painting, twilight painting. And why challenging? What makes it difficult? Well, you're working in a dynamic environment, a rapidly changing situation. The light is changing quickly, both in intensity and color. So it just means that you've got to work a little harder, a little faster to get your shot.
So true. Well, let's let everybody get a couple of seconds to settle in here. Most of you know the routine. Let me get a little housekeeping in here. Please let us know if you're willing, where you're tuning in from in the chats. And there's two different things going on here. There's the chat and there's the Q&A. If you have questions for Lance, it's better to put them in the Q&A and we'll sort through them. And most of the questions will be answered at the end of the webinar. However, if something is like really timely, I'll probably stop Lance and say, hey, Lance, we're going to answer this now. And if you put something in chat that should be a Q&A, you might see it disappear as we move it over to the Q&A. Otherwise, sit back, enjoy, have a lot of fun. We're really thrilled that you're here, and we're really thrilled to have Lance. I've been learning from him for a long time, and I'm looking forward to learning even more from him today. This is a great topic, and like Twilight, it goes fast.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. And focus, please. Focus. Yeah, thank you, Matt. The admiration and respect is totally mutual. It's a real honor to work with you any chance I get the opportunity. So thanks again for inviting me today.
And thanks to novoflex for hosting this. We'll talk more about gear and stuff, but for now, let's just enjoy what Lance is offering for us to learn. Lance, I'm going to hand it over to you. Take it away, and okay. I'll be in the chat. I'll see all of you there.
Very good. It's good to know you're back there. Thanks, Matt. All right. So, yeah, as I said before, when I started doing light painting and night photography back in the mid 80s, it was kind of an obscure and weird thing. Not many people knew that it was a genre or a type of photography, or even a thing that you could do. And, with over the years, as technologies evolve, we've gone from film to digital, and digital's gotten better and better and better. Night photography has really become everyday commonplace and just not extraordinarily unique in any sense anymore. Just the fact that you can take a photograph of the Milky Way with your phone right now, it's just mind-blowing how far the technology has come in the scope of one person's career. But light painting itself is kind of a generic term that we use to talk about adding light to long exposure night photography in all its forms. And we're gonna start off by talking about just light painting in general a little bit, what it is, different types of it, and might as well just jump right in with the slides. That seems to make the most sense to me. So yeah, twilight painting is light. It's kind of a corny name we came up with. Is basically just light painting during twilight. And the challenges that come with that are that your ambient light is changing quickly. All right. So this is Rapa Nui, or Easter Island, and one of the most amazing sunsets I've ever seen before. And Um, just extraordinary place, and I really feel fortunate to have been able to have the opportunity to go here a couple of times and photograph these megalithic, monolithic sculptures known as moai. All right, so let's talk about light painting in general terms first. What is it exactly? In its purest, oldest form, it's basically adding light to long exposure photographs with a handheld flashlight. You can do it from outside the frame, within the frame, from a single position. You can light up just one part of the frame, or you can light the whole thing. This image, made in Joshua Tree National Park, was lit with an incandescent flashlight, a real old school incandescent flashlight, from camera right, scraping it along the side of the building there. That shows all that texture in the stone wall and the old weathered wood. Also, around to the left side of the building, I went into the frame, making sure the camera could not see the light, and shone it in through the window on the left side of the building, lighting up those bottles in the interior space there. And then also reflected the light off of the wall on that left side of the building, and that's what filled in the light on the ground on the left side there. So that's kind of traditional old school light painting. Shadow painting is a term you don't hear very often or don't see very often, but when you have an opportunity to play with it, it's super fun and can be really powerful. That rock tower there was maybe 100 to 150 feet tall. It's enormous. So I've got a model who's doing the yoga pose. She is out of the frame, camera right. I think she was probably, maybe 50 feet or so from the rock tower. And I just moved back and forth with a bright LED flashlight until the size of her shadow got to be, proportional to the rock tower in the background there. So shadow painting, fun stuff if you find the opportunity to do it. Light drawing. This is Picasso back here, and obviously not one of my photographs. This is a Life magazine photographer named Jean Millet, who did a story on Picasso in the 1950s. And Picasso made a bunch of light drawings in his studio, and Millet lit him with popped a flash on him. So some very early light drawing, where the difference between light painting and light drawing, you're pointing the light source towards the camera, as opposed to lighting your subject. The light becomes the subject itself. And the same is true with light writing. This is Vicky Da Silva. She's an artist and activist who's used light writing and light painting throughout her career to promote activist causes that she believes in. So this is an old, I think, I'm not sure, it was late 70s, early 80s image, obviously on film back then. Another really unusual and interesting type of light painting is working with stencils. This is an Australian artist who goes by the name of Tig Tab, and she is a graphic designer, makes these amazing stencils in Illustrator, and then prints them out on a translucent material, puts them on a box, basically like a shoe box, and uses colored gels on a flash, pops that in front facing towards the camera. And that's what the dragonflies are and the lily pads in there. She's using a tool called EL wire, electroluminescent wire, to create the waterfall there. What a really cool style and technique she's got there, as well as some traditional light painting on the structure in the background to fill in the shadows. So really cool stuff. These are each one of those dragonflies and the lily pads are a separate exposure done in place and then combined in layers in Photoshop. Some of her work she does all in one frame, but this was just beyond possibility. All right. So if you are just getting into night photography and light painting, you probably are familiar with what we're calling low-level landscape lighting. And this is different from traditional light painting in that rather than a handheld light source, it's usually a light in a fixed position. So this is more like studio lighting or traditional location lighting, where you've got a continuous light source or multiple continuous light sources on light stands or propped up on rocks, things like that. This was made with Matt actually out at the Toadstool Hoodoos in Kanab, Utah. Low-level landscape lighting. A lot of people who use this technique are striving for a completely natural look, and they don't want their images to look like they've been artificially illuminated. That's not my style so much. Obviously, you can tell this is lit. It's just the way that I like to do it. It's a very versatile technique. It gives you a tremendous amount of control. It's easily repeatable. The challenge about working with a flashlight is that you're waving a flashlight around. You'll never do it exactly the same 2 times in a row, no matter how hard you try. So that's part of the fun. It's also part of the challenge to it. But low-level landscape lighting or working with LED panels on light stands, you can place them precisely. They are highly controllable, both in color temperature and in brightness. But in general, they are a wide, even light source. We'll talk about the tools a little bit later. But so this is low-level landscape lighting. And again, it can be lit to look completely natural with very, very minimalist lighting, just filling in the shadows on a foreground that's darker than the sky. Or you can light it this way and make it look theatrical, more like stage lighting. Okay. This is a shot made in Gold Point Ghost Town in Nevada. It's an old mining town, and this is some mining equipment in a shed. There's no light other than my single LED flashlight in here. So, stumbling around in complete and total darkness, just waving a flashlight. I did this shot maybe 8 or 10 different times, and every single one of them is completely different. Okay. Moving on. So this is what we're really here to talk about today, is working in Twilight. So you can use any of the techniques that we just talked about previously in Twilight. And again, the challenge is that you are working in conditions that are changing quickly. So the light after sunset, the light typically gets bluer and bluer and bluer and bluer until it gets just about as dark as it's going to get, and then it starts warming up again. So you'll go from extremely warm golden light just before the sun sets, and then it just cools down, immensely to the point where you're at 10,000 Kelvin or higher in color temperature, extremely blue light. And then once it's fully dark, if you are in a moonlit environment, your color temperature is going to end up around 4,200 Kelvin. And if you're in a starlit environment with no moon, it's a little bit warmer at 3,850. If you're working in an environment with ambient artificial light, all bets are off, and it can be anything. These days they tend to be mostly LED lights, but we've got historically sodium vapor lights and mercury vapor lights, incandescent lights, metal halide lights, neon lights, LED lights that can be all over the spectrum. So the artificially lit environment is crazy fun to work in, and I really love doing urban night photography because you've got all these different colored light sources coming from all different directions. But anyway, so working in Twilight, again, with the rapidly changing situations, you want to be able to control as much as possible and keep it as simple as possible, because you don't get a whole lot of second chances. So with that in mind, what I believe is the best technique is to start with one aperture based on the depth of field that you need. Start with one ISO, probably going to pick the ISO that will be a compromise between really long exposures and moderate amounts of noise. Of course, today's cameras, we can shoot at 6400 with impunity. So ISO is less of a factor than it used to be. But in general, you want to vary your shutter speed as it gets darker rather than changing the aperture or the ISO. And you definitely don't want to change more than one of those variables because it just is a recipe for confusion and messing things up. So anyway, different types of light painting. There's more as well. There's all different kinds of ways to add light to night photographs. This was a really fun experimental thing that I did with a class I was teaching in Boston. We're in an old fort. This is a bunker, underground bunker in a fort. There's about 10 people in this room picking up glow sticks and throwing them up into the air over and over and over again during a 1 minute exposure. This one woman, Amy, was standing there with her arms up in the air, and there's like 8 or 10 other people grabbing. Believe it or not, there's only about one glow stick per person. So like 10 glow sticks. And everybody is in there laughing and hollering and having just a hell of a good time throwing these glow sticks up in the air. And that's the only source of light in this entire picture is just those little, luminescent glow sticks. Super fun. Light painting is by far, I think, the most fun you can possibly have doing night photography. Maybe any kind of photography. It's freeing, and it just gives you so many opportunities to be creative and to do something different. All right, so let's get into it. Talk about ways to use light painting and different things you can do with it. This is also in Utah with Matt. I was gonna say Devil's Garden, but
it is. It's Matate Arch in the Devil's Garden.
Devil's Garden. All right. Great, thanks, man. So this is a single image that's probably about 5 minutes long. It's going to be part of a stack of images used for star trails. And look at that. So there's the stack. This is probably 30 to 45 minutes of stars facing the north. There are 2 LED light panels on stands. One is behind that rock structure on the left side of the frame, shooting towards the camera up on the underside of the arch. And then there's one on camera left that is, notice it's dimmer, and that is providing general overall fill light for the whole scene. And that's one of the things that's really key. And if you've ever done studio lighting or location lighting, with artificial lights, whether it's with strobes or hot lights, you know that lighting ratios are a powerful way to change and describe your scene through added light. So I think the fact that the backlight on here on the underside of that arch is a stop or two brighter than the fill light makes the shot a lot more successful than it would be if the whole thing was evenly lit. Okay. So light painting can also be used in situations where you have extreme contrast and you can't really control the exposure. So this is another shot on Rapa Nui. That's the Tongariki Ahu with the moai in the background. It's a great sunrise location, and this is sunrise. Not something I see very often, but in any case, you can see the sun's right. I'm pointing to the east. The sun's rising behind the moai. You can't see what's going on in the foreground. So by reducing the ambient exposure and adding some fill light on the foreground, whoa, look at that. There's this amazing Birdman petroglyph in the foreground. It's upside down. It's a little hard to figure it out, but it kind of looks like a toucan with the beak at the bottom on the right, and then the head with a big eye, and it's the wings spread out. It's tempting to go in there in Photoshop and turn them around right side up, but that's not the way it was in the scene. So I left it where it is. But you can see that just by adding this light low to the ground, just out of the frame, maybe it's 30 or so degrees to the right of the camera, but it's probably only about 8 to 10 inches off the ground. It really brings out the depth and the lines in that petroglyph carving. And I was able to reduce the exposure to get a nice sunrise in the background with those moai silhouetted. So light painting, as I mentioned, can be super dramatic. This is the stones of Stennis on the Orkney Islands in Scotland. It's a little archipelago of islands off the north coast of Scotland, and one of the locations that we'll be going to in an upcoming adventure tour for National Parks at Night. So we typically go there in late May when they have this amazing music festival every year, and I always want to go and hear this traditional Celtic music from around the world. But that also means that we're there during the period that they call simmer dim, when it never gets really dark, but you've got about 6 hours of really cool and amazing twilight. But so as you can see, the standing stones are just purely silhouetted if you expose for the ambient light. So it gives you the perfect opportunity to play. And that's exactly what I did right here. You can see there's a backlight here. It's a LED light panel on a stand, positioned so the camera won't see it. It creates the light on the ground and the shadow of the standing stone. And then the light on the faces of the stones was done with a flashlight running around in the frame, lighting from 3 different positions, one on each stone. So the stone in the foreground was lit from the left side, as was the stone on the left side. And then the stone on the right in the back was lit from out of the frame on the right. And they're really oblique angles because I want to show the texture in that stone. Now, going to a northern latitude, someplace like Orkney or Iceland or the Faroe Islands, is a great place to do twilight light painting if you're going in May or June, because the twilight lasts all night long. That's just fantastic. And it doesn't change nearly as quickly as it would, in more temperate or southerly climates. Okay. So this is a scene, the bristlecone pine trees in the Eastern Sierra of California, up outside of Bishop, California. And excuse me, if you've ever been there, it's a bit of a slog to get up there. It's 11,000 feet of elevation in the White Mountains, and it's inaccessible most of the year because of snow. The roads are closed. It's a long drive to get up here. It was going to be cloudy. We knew it was going to be cloudy, but it was the only opportunity we had to go up. So we went, and it's rapidly getting darker and darker and darker. The clouds are thick and thick and thick. What are we going to do? All right. So notice it's 8 p.m. You can see the exposure up there, 30 seconds f8, 800. And it's not fully dark yet. There's twilight happening, but there's just not much going on. So let's make it pop. Yeah. This tree just looks like, some monster that Captain Kirk's battling out of an old Star Trek episode. And I wanted to light it to emphasize that, to make it look like some kind of weird, scary Star Trek monster. So rather than, and this is flashlight, single handheld flashlight, you can tell from the light and the shadows, it's lit from out of the frame on the right-hand side. One thing I'll add here in terms of technique is when you are light painting with a flashlight, never start with the light pointed at your subject, because that's going to create a hot spot. So turn the flashlight on and hold it, point it up in the air and lower it down into your frame. Lower it down into your frame, lighting up your subject. That way you avoid a hotspot, and you can also control the light better so that it doesn't spill onto the ground where you don't want. And then also, when you're done, raise that flashlight back up out of the scene, point it into the air, and then turn it off. That's the best way to control the flashlight for handheld light painting. So basically, this shot was done from a single position, but lit. No, it wasn't actually. I can see there's lighting on the. It's a while ago. I don't have the year on here, so there is some light on the backside as well. So I did light it from both the left and right, but it's primarily on the right hand side. Starting with the light up in the sky, bringing it down onto the tree, and then taking the light and sweeping it across the ground, the foreground, to light up the sagebrush and the broken rocks in the foreground there. So that light is just above the level of the sagebrush, kind of scooting it across the top of the brushes. Number one rule of light painting, no matter what you're doing, whether it's Twilight or in a darkened room or whatever, do not light from the camera position, because what you're going to get, no matter what light source you're looking, is something that looks like on-camera flash. And we know how sucky that can be. So don't light from the camera position. All right. 10 seconds, F10, F6400. This is on the island of Maui in Hawaii, 5 minutes after 8. Kind of late twilight, late in sunset, pointing west. It's dark enough that there are some stars in the sky, but there's still plenty of light on the horizon. 10 seconds was enough to get the waves to flatten out and give that nice look there. But I wanted to see some more light on the lava foreground. The lava rocks, pure black, no light whatsoever falling on them. So here we go. This is 6 minutes later, 3 seconds longer because it's getting darker. Same aperture is chosen for depth of field there, so I could get depth of field from the foreground to the stars. And that's one of the great things about being able to shoot at 6400. If I were doing this at 100 ISO, this would be a 13-minute exposure. I didn't want to do that. I was getting the look that I needed from 10, 13 seconds on the waves. I got the depth of field that I needed from F10. So 6400 gave me a reasonably short exposure time. And it also, this is another thing to keep in mind here, if you've got stars in the sky, they're going to be points rather than star trails. So I wanted to keep the exposure short for 2 reasons. One, just because it was really tricky stumbling around over the lava here, and I didn't want to be doing that for extended periods of time. And perhaps more importantly, I wanted those stars in the sky to be points. And if you were to look at this image, in a large print or full screen, you would see lots of little stars in the sky, and they're super sharp. So I changed the exposure by changing the shutter speed. Once I determined the general shutter speed range that I wanted to use and the aperture that I needed to use to get adequate depth of field. My goodness. Okay. So going forward, not backwards. All right. There's another standing stone in Scotland, just a simple single flashlight on there. Real subtle. This one doesn't need all the high drama. It kind of speaks for itself. So again, rules of thumb here. Do not light from the camera position unless you're looking for on-camera flash type look. I never find an occasion to do that. Flashlights, old school light painting, they're more difficult to control, but you can go within the frame you can light a very small area. You have zoomable flashlights with zoom heads, so you can light a really small little area. You can be very, very precise with the placement of your light, and you can light a small area. But that said, it's very hard to get repeatable results because you're a human being holding a flashlight and you're stumbling around in the dark. You're going to be at a different distance from your light to your flashlight within, you can try to be as repeatable and precise as you can, but it's never going to be exactly the same. And that's one of the frustrations, but also one of the joys of working with flashlight light painting, because it can be just a world of surprises waiting for you when you go back. Back in the old days, with film where you didn't get to see, you didn't have the instant feedback, you just shoot the same thing 10 different times and hope that one of them worked out well when you process the film. All right. LED light panels. They are fantastic tools. They're just really incredible. I'm going to hold this one up right now. Just quickly here. This is a Luxley fiddle. It's my favorite light painting tool. It's just really fabulous in that it's highly adjustable from 1/10% to 100% full power in brightness. Has a color temperature range from 2,500 to 10,000 Kelvin, plus just about any color you could want. So tremendously versatile tool, but it's a real wide field instrument with wide, even lights. There are grids that you can use to modify those lights and narrow down the field. Thanks, Matt. Grids you can use to narrow the field a little bit. This one is a little bit more narrow, a little thinner, so it's a wider beam than this one. Real handy. As far as I know, Luxley is one of maybe the only, but there might be others, light painting LED panels that have such precise control that allow you to go down to 1/10% brightness, which seems kind of crazy. But so often we're using that when we're doing Milky Way or starlight photography at f2.8, 6400 or 12,800. Almost any light source is going to be too bright if you're trying to light something in your foreground, and is what we're normally doing. So being able to go down to a really weak, dim light source has advantages for that kind of work. It's also very unobtrusive if you're working in a clandestine situation where you're trying not to get busted because you're trespassing. I would never do that. But also, if you're working in a group environment where you don't want to be disturbing other people with a flashlight or a headlight or a red light, a dim LED light panels can be a great advantage. Okay. So again, keep it simple by adjusting just your shutter speed to match the changing ambient light conditions. And one thing that I didn't put in here is to be mindful of the color temperature of your added light source relative to the ambient light. It's really a classic color combination scenario to use a warmer color temperature for light painting than your ambient light. So if you're working in Twilight where the light is very, very blue, a warm color temperature on your added light gives you that great warm, cool, orange, blue color contrast. And again, it's challenging because the light is getting bluer and bluer and bluer as it gets darker and darker. So, that's another reason to consider using those adjustable color temperature LED light panels. I don't want it to seem like I am advocating for one technique over the other, because at heart, I'm an old incandescent maglite flashlight painter. That's where I cut my chops, and that's what I still really love to do. But I think you should use the best tool for the situation that you're working with. and also the one that gives you the most satisfaction. And I'll show you some examples. I think where we've got both LED panels in the background and flashlight in the foreground, so you can use both or more than two different types of light sources in the same frame. My own approach is to do as much of the work in camera in the frame as possible and as little post-processing as possible. Just because it's just, I enjoy working in the field and getting it right in camera more than I enjoy working in Photoshop. There's not a right or a wrong way to do that. You can be like TigTab with the stencils and expose 20 different frames and combine them all in post into one shot, and it gives you a tremendous amount of control. Of course, you can mask in parts of different images. You can change the opacity of different layers, and it just gives you tremendous control. And I'll do that when I have to do that. But if I can do it in the field with my light painting, I'd rather get it all done in the field in one frame, just because I get more satisfaction from it. And I also get more exercise that way, running around like a headless chicken, trying to light 3 or 4 different rocks in a 30-second exposure. Anyway, yeah. So if you're going to be that headless chicken running around in the frame, it's a good idea to wear your ninja suit. Seriously, wear black. Do not wear a glow-in-the-dark National Parks at Night t-shirt when you're doing light painting in the frame. Yeah, and black glove liners are a good thing too if you're holding a flashlight, because the light can bounce off and you see these little glowing hands moving around in your frame. Okay. I'm going to walk you through a couple of different examples and tell you how they were lit. And then we have, after that, a few different examples of sequences of Twilight light painting images. This is an oldie but goodie. This is one of my favorite light painting shots that I've ever done. It's almost 15 years old. Was made in Studi Butte, Texas, outside of Big Bend National Park. It's pretty self-explanatory what the subject is, but man, it was so much fun to light this thing. It really was. It's a flashlight from 3 different positions. The back of the truck was lit from, it's basically backlighting pointing towards, so the light is shining from behind forwards, but it's skirting past the right side of the camera. Then you've got, I go behind the cab of the truck and light the interior with the same flashlight. And then out of the frame to the right, kind of pointing at that front right corner on the fender, lighting that, and then scraping it across the ground, getting just a little bit of light on the door of the truck that's laying there. And this is made in moonlight. So you get that moon shadow from the cab and a little bit of the shadow from the door on the ground. I don't have the specifics of the exposure up here for this one, but it's a single exposure, probably several minutes long. So I did not have to race around too much like that headless chicken. I had a little bit more time to work with. Because of the clouds in the sky, I wasn't worried about stars becoming trails. So I knew that I had time to work here. This is super simple. Joshua tree, obviously. There's just one light source here. It's a super bright flashlight pointed directly towards the camera with the Joshua tree blocking the light source. The most important thing here is to make sure that the light does not spill out from the side of the tree and cause a big flare. So I didn't want to have that hotspot, but I definitely wanted strong backlighting. So I am this is the time I am pointing the camera, the light source directly towards the camera, but being very, very careful not to let it spill out on the sides. I did move it up and down the tree so that I've made sure to light the little needles on the Joshua tree, as well as get that backlit effect on the trunk of the tree. Consideration here was keeping the exposure short enough so that the stars were points of light rather than star trails. So it's a higher ISO shot. And you really want a very bright flashlight to be able to do this, even though you're working at high ISOs. This was a crazy piece of ice, so not surprisingly found in Iceland, and we called it the ice whale. Worked with this thing, trying to light this up without showing up in the frame for quite a long time here. So it's a flashlight held up against the surface of the ice on the backside. So again, it's backlit, glowing from within. And I'm basically moving the light along the length of this ice whale and doing my best not to let my feet show below it or to let the glowing light source illuminate myself, which was very much present in the frame there. So again, it's cloudy. This is a twilight into darkness. We're waiting for it to get dark, hoping for aurora to pop out from behind those clouds, and just playing with lighting on this guy. It took a number of exposures to be able to get this without having to do a lot of cloning, getting myself out of the frame. And that's what I mean about doing it in camera. Sure, especially now in the days of generative AI, Phil, very easy to remove yourself. But again, I want to do it so that I don't have to do that. It's just, you're probably getting the sense that doing this act of light painting for me is pretty much as important, if not more so, than the resulting image. I just love that being in the field, trying to figure out a solution, how to make something like this work without having to spend a lot of time cleaning it up in Photoshop. Another Joshua Tree shot, very, very simple one here. This is kind of an older LED flashlight that was pretty warm, pretty cool, probably had about a 7,000 Kelvin temperature and a lot of green to it. So I have lit the little shrubbery here from out of the frame on the right, and then done a short exposure for the overall ambient light. Late twilight, and the sky is so magenta because I've color corrected for the blue-green LED flashlight. I think it works. Let's go next slide. There we go. Okay. This one is another one from the Orkney Islands in Scotland, made with another one of our National Parks at Night partners, Tim Cooper. And this is the grounds of an old Victorian hunting lodge in a place that I stayed once or twice on trips to Orkney. We're there in late May, and the bluebells are in full bloom, as you can see. So this is just a really fabulous and fun place to photograph. There are 3 Luxley fiddle lights on light stands, one camera left, one behind the tree, and one camera right, lighting up as evenly as possible all these bluebells and the tree in the foreground. And then I believe we took a flashlight with the head zoomed out to a spotlight and just ever so slightly lit up, and this is a cool LED blue flashlight, ever so slightly lit up that waterfall in the background without wanting that to look like it had any added light. So there's definitely pulling up the waterfall from the shadows in the background, but we did hit it with just a tiny, tiny little bit of blue LED light from a zoomed flashlight back there. So yeah, this is the grounds of Woodwick House on Orkney Islands. You can see from the sky that it is twilight. We're there during that simmer dim period of endless twilight. But beneath those trees, it's much, much, much darker. So we really had to add quite a bit of light to make this work. Okay. So, transformative power of light painting. Here we come. This is the Faroe Islands. This is a minute and a half with a neutral density filter to get that exposure. We're looking at 6:37 p.m. This is no light painting whatsoever. This is just the ambient light. And I really, honestly, I think I prefer this image to the light painted one that's coming up next, but it's just so different. I want you to see both versions. So minute and a half at 6:37. And this is a minute at 6:25, but without that neutral density filter and light painting, flashlight. And basically what I did here, I'm holding a flashlight about knee high, and I walked behind the camera from camera left all the way around camera right and just shone that light low to the ground across these rocks. So this is earlier. There's more light in the sky, but no neutral density filter. That's kind of a complicating things for analyzing these two photographs, but that's just what I shot at the time. So there's the image, the long exposure, neutral density. The ocean is completely flat. The clouds are really kind of drawn out. You've got that rainstorm out over on the right-hand side. Just love this image. And then just totally different shot here with that flash low to the ground flashlight. It just changes everything. I'll be curious if we want to put it in the chat, which one you like better here. I think I like the natural light one myself. All right. So remember, Twilight changes, but you have control over the light that you're adding as well. You can add from different locations, different positions, different intensities, wide lights, narrow lights, different color. And this is kind of funny, these two images. Again, I was with Matt. We were at Mono Lake in the Eastern Sierra, and there's famous tufa formations. We were out. This is another sunrise shot, 5:04 a.m. Look at that. And the only reason we were out for sunrise is because it was during the zodiacal light that happens near the the autumnal equinox every year. So that's the glow in the sky to the right, or in between the two tufa formations, is zodiacal light. It's sunlight reflected off of space dust. Really cool phenomenon. But the light painting here is not really light painting. It was somebody's focus light who was off photo. We were here with a workshop. Somebody was standing, 20 or 30 yards to the right of us, and said, "Hey, I need a focus light. Can you turn it on for me?" So, or can I turn on my flashlight? So they had a big, powerful LED flashlight, and they shone it on the tufas, and this is what we got. Yeah, that's okay. It's not the way I would light it. I would kind of do something more like this. So this is probably 3,000. Maybe it's lower color temperature, 3,000 Kelvin. It's one of those Luxley LED panels on a light stand, way off to the left. You can tell by the shadows, and it's at low power, so it's not. It's not lighting up like Las Vegas. It's subtle. This is more subtle. But also, you can notice that it's not lighting up the secondary tufa formation on the right-hand side. Light was changing quickly. We were there for zodiacal light. Didn't have time to get a second light on that other rock formation there. So 20 seconds at 5:10 a.m. and this is 30 seconds at 5:04. So just 6 minutes later, look how much the sky has changed. Look how much the sky has changed. Come on, there we go. It's only a half a stop brighter, but it's just the colors are totally different. Everything else is the same. So it's the changing ambient light and the changing light sources that we've got there. And then I threw this one in for a bonus. You might recognize that fellow there. That's our illustrious Matt Hill. Hi, Matt. I don't remember which one of us had the idea to do a portrait of him out here, but it just seemed like the thing to do. And we're also, oh, look at that. There's a novoflex tripod there in the standing right next to him.
Imagine that.
Imagine that. Yeah. So let's see. I don't have exposure information here, but again, this is that same light that we were using to light up the rock formation, the tufa tower there. We've just redirected it onto matte. I probably should have tilted it up a little bit so it didn't hit the rocks in the foreground quite so much. But again, this was after being up all night, going home from a sunrise shoot, and it was just a quick thought to do this. So had I done this a little bit more intentionally, I would not have lit up the rocks in the foreground quite so much, so that they take away from that. Maybe I should go in and do some post on there. Right. Okay. So just emphasizing this one more time again, light changes quickly, and you have to be working on the fly to be able to adapt to that. So here we are back in Yosemite's High Sierra. This is up on Tioga Pass, and this is a famous rock. If you've ever done a workshop with me, you'll know probably that this is known as Steve's Rock. My mentor and late great friend Steve Harper photographed this rock for decades. So many different versions of this, and almost every single one of them is on film. Anyway, this is basically just initial scouting, planning for a shot. First go. We've got a crescent moon above the rock. There are some pretty serious wildfires going on on the other side of the park. There's a lot of smoke in the air that we figure is going to make for some good lighting. 2 seconds, f10, 100 ISO, 7:45 p.m. Next, 4 minutes later, look at that, the exact same exposure, the exact same white balance, and it has changed so much in just 4 minutes. Wow, what happened there? The smoke had a lot to do with the color of the light on this night. Normally, it would have gotten bluer, but we've got all that red in the sky from the fire. This is just 4 minutes after that previous one with a slight adjustment of the camera position. All right, so now I've put a light on a stand, camera left. It's fairly subtle. It's just bringing out a little bit more detail in the rock. It's getting darker. 1 minute after the last exposure. It's bringing out a little more detail. It's subtle. It's kind of meh. It's kind of flat. I want it to pop a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is, well, I haven't changed the light just yet. It's just I'm reducing the overall exposure. 750, 756. No, it's the same shot except 6 minutes later. It's gotten a lot darker. Exposure is the same. The light is about 45 degrees off angle from the camera, and that's that soft, even light that's it's not frontal, it's not from the camera, but it's lighting up the entire surface of the rock fairly evenly with a little bit of shadow on the right side. The foreground is evenly lit. I want to make it a little bit more dramatic. So here I go. Now I'm going to move that light around to 90 degrees. So it's pointing almost directly at the left side of the rock. There's a lot more shape and texture from that harsher, more oblique angle. The whole right side of the rock is in shadow. You can see that it's really got a lot more volume and shape now because of the position of the light. There is also now a second light low to the ground, camera right, that is just at the very, very dimmest setting, just to pop a tiny little bit of fill light onto the shadow side of the right on the rock there. So much brighter on the left, minimal light just to fill in the shadows on the right side. So this is 2 seconds at 7:58, and here we were 2 seconds at 7:56. So a little bit different, not too much. And then here's our final image 1 minute later. A little bit, I raised the intensity of the light on the right-hand side just a little bit. This has been processed. Kept the exposure short for the moon. I wanted to have that crescent moon in there. And if you were looking at this, full size, you'd see the complete circle of the moon, the dark part of the moon would be visible as well. So there you go. That's Steve's Rock on Tioga Pass in Yosemite. Now, somehow we're back in Scotland again. Not in Orkney this time, but in the Outer Hebrides on the Isle of Lewis. These are the famous Callanish standing stones, which are really, really incredible. And the organization of these stones make them really, really difficult to photograph. They're just like from standing there on the ground, it's a chaotic jumble, and it's really hard not to have all the stones overlapping and interacting with each other. Now, I'm here again at the end of May, and the twilight lasts for freaking ever. So look at this exposure, 2 seconds, f/22, ISO 100 at 11:45 p.m. It's pretty darn late. It's almost midnight, and I got 2 seconds at f/22. Wow. f/22 so I had something longer than a fraction of a second, and also because I wanted to have depth of field, because the camera is really close to that stone in the foreground, probably like 8-10 feet away, and I wanted to have everything nice and sharp. So this is just my planning shot. There's ambient light, no light painting on here. This is 3 seconds, 11:48. So let's look at our timeline. 3 minutes later, added a 1 second of exposure, so that's a half a stop compared to the previous exposure. And I hit it with a flashlight from the camera right side. It's very subtle. It's more, you can see a color difference than a luminosity difference on the stone in the foreground at this point. 3 seconds, 11:48. 15 seconds, and this is what? Oh, this is almost a half an hour later, and we only went from 3 seconds to 15 seconds. How about that? That's crazy. So why is there so much time in between these shots? I was running around helping students who were there on a workshop, and just going back to this, doing exposures every so often. But you can see it has gotten a little bit darker, and the flashlight is a little bit more pronounced. Let's see where it goes from here. 15 seconds at 12:16. 20 seconds at 12:48. So again, this is 32 minutes later, and I had to open up to f/11, so we're 2 stops more open, and down to 20 seconds. The flashlight is more prominent, and at this point, I have decided to cross-light this stone in the foreground, both from the left and the right side. So it's a sweep of flashlight from 45 degrees on either side of the camera, starting up in the space in the sky, and bringing the light slowly down along the length of the stone, and stopping just before I get to the ground, because I don't want to light up the ground. So bring it down into the frame, get to the bottom of the stone, and then raise it back up again and take it out of the frame on the right side and on the left side. Notice the light on the left side is brighter than the light on the left side. I'm using a non-adjustable brightness flashlight. So how did I do that? I got closer when I lit from the left than from the right. And that changes the intensity. So I was about twice as far away when I lit the stone on the right side than from the left side, because I wanted, even though I'm cross lighting it, both sides, I didn't want it to be evenly lit all the way around. So there's a final image on this one. 12:48 a.m. and it's still twilight, and probably going to start getting lighter in another hour or so. It's a really marvelous thing to experience. I love the endless summer twilight in northern climates almost as much as I love going out and photographing aurora up in the north in the wintertime. Okay. Quick sip here. Now, this is a demonstration shot that I made, I don't know, a little bit more than a week ago across the street from my house in a field of hay bales. And I can't do this without telling you how much I suffered for my art. In this instance here, we'd had torrential rain, and this field was soggy. I'm wearing knee-high Wellington boots in here and squishing through water that's going over the top of the toes on my boots. And it's summertime in Vermont. It's about 85% humidity. It's about 80 degrees in a field of water. And what goes with the field of water in summertime? Mosquitoes. Yes, there was like millions and millions and millions of mosquitoes in this field, and it was so bad that I sent my wife to run across the street and grab a head net for me, which I had to wear through the whole time. And she's like, "Where's my head net?" She left. She couldn't deal with it. I don't blame her. Anyway, so this is daylight. It's the sun has just set, so there's no sunlight left, but it's not really twilight yet. It's not really getting dark. Walking around the field, there's maybe like 30 of these hay bales in various positions throughout the field. And I'm looking for a composition. This is the one that I settled on. I liked having the depth and the shape of the curve, the way these three kind of go around in that little C shape. They take you back to that tree and up and out of the frame. That's my light stand on the one in the foreground. It's just where I put it, so I didn't have to sit it down in the wet. And that's a 1/10 of a second at 8:37. Okay, and this here, there's my wife. She's standing at the hyperfocal distance, so I can focus. I wanted to be able to get all three hay bales and any eventual stars that might show up in focus with the lens I was using, and at that distance, I needed to get f8. I needed to shoot at f8. And that's an advantage to shooting at twilight. When you're shooting under starlight, you don't have the luxury of shooting at f8 or f10 or f22. But in twilight, you can. So it's kind of liberating to have that freedom again after photographing so many starry night skies at f2.8. Anyway, so I used hyperfocal distance to maximize my depth of field, calculated it with photo pills, had her walk off the distance to that spot, and I focused on her, and then she got out of the frame. This is 8:37, 1/10 of a second. Here we go. 3 minutes later, a 1/2 of a second, and I've placed some lights in the frame. They're not really doing anything yet, but you can see in just a couple of minutes, it's gotten considerably darker here. Let's see. Let me go back. Where are my annotation tools? Matt, remind me, where are those annotation tools? Where I get my
upper right-hand corner, drawing.
Thank you. Let's turn them on. All right. There we go. So I've got two Luxley fiddle lights on stands pointing. They are pointing towards those two hay bales in the back, but they're not straight on. they're a little bit behind and shooting just a little bit forward. Right now, they are at 100% brightness, and you can barely tell that they're doing anything because it's so light out. But when the light is changing so quickly, you really need to get started early. Otherwise, if you're trying to compose and focus, you have this narrow window of when the light is just right. So get that done early before it gets dark and before the mosquitoes have taken too much of your blood. All right, there's 2 of them back there. I only did 1 arrow, but there's 2 lights on stands, 1 on each hay bale. They're about 30 feet or so off to the right of each hay bale, and maybe 5 feet or so behind them. Okay, so let's see. This is 8:54. That was 8:40. So we've waited 14 minutes here for it to get darker. And what do you know? It has gotten darker. I've also put some flashlight on the hay bale in the foreground, trying to mimic or approximate the light of the LED panels in the background. The flashlight that I'm using is an LED Lenser P6R Work. And I like that light very much because it has a zoomable head and it has a 4300 Kelvin color temperature, which is really rare for flashlights. So I set my Luxley lights to the same color temperature so that the flashlight and the LED panels would be the same color. This is half a second, 8:54. It looks kind of dark. There's not enough light happening yet. So you might have noticed, I'll go back here again, and let me grab another little arrow. Here's our light sources. And for the next shot, they moved over to the right a little bit. I backed them off because I wanted the spread of those lights to be a little bit wider. I'm using, on this instance, I'm using this thicker grid, which takes the Luxley fiddle from, I think it's about a 60-degree spread down to a 25 or 30-degree spread. So it really narrows the beam of light considerably, and it also eats up like 3 stops of light too. So that I've got a lot of light loss. They're still cranked up pretty high at this point. This is at 1 second at 9 p.m. So it's 6 minutes later than the last shot. It's getting darker. The flashlight is a little bit more prominent, but it's not covering enough of the hay bale. So I need to work on that a little bit more. Now, one other thing that you can't tell yet from this scene is that there is a 3/4 moon out of the frame to the right. And so that means that eventually there's going to be moonlight and moon shadow on these hay bales coming from the same direction as the light sources. But I was aware of that from the beginning, but logistically setting up the shot, it made more sense to light from the right-hand side. All right, so here is this, let's see, that last one, sorry, 9 o'clock and 9:11. We're 11 minutes later. You can see the ambient light is changing. The moonlight is becoming more prominent in that it's lighting up the grass in the field more than just the twilight in the sky. As it gets darker, the moonlight becomes more dominant. And my flashlight is a little bit more intense. I'm lighting up that whole surface of the hay bale. Now notice I'm not lighting it quite the same way as the LED panels, but I'm liking the way that it looks. I'm also cognizant of the fact that I wish the moon was on my left and lighting up the other side of the hay bales, but it wasn't. So that was one thing I did not have any control over, that and the mosquitoes. Okay, so 9:12, just a minute later, I said, well, what happens if we go and light that hay bale from the left-hand side. I think that's going to look pretty interesting. Yep, and it does. So back again, flashlight left. Let's see, 5 seconds, 9:12. And back here, 3 seconds, 9:12. So this is one after another, increasing the ambient exposure a little bit longer, going back and putting that light on the right side. Can you see what I'm starting to think about here? I'm going to put lights together on both sides of the hay bale. Yeah, okay. And here we go. Now I'm moving those lights. Go back to my drawing again. Oops. Undo. Lights are right here, and they're off. They're a little further out here. I moved them closer in this frame and a little bit more frontal. They're not quite 100% straight on now, but they're a little bit more frontal and a little bit closer because they were spilling, even with the grid on those lights, they were spilling onto the grass. And I didn't want that. I wanted to light just the hay bales. So I'm manipulating a bunch of different things here. I'm being cognizant of the ambient exposure and changing the time. I'm changing the angle of the position of the light, and I'm also having to adjust the intensity of the lights. And just to make it really complicated on myself, I do have 3 Luxleys and 3 stands, but just to make it more fun and more challenging and more educational, it's like, okay, well, let's do some flashlight light painting on the hay bale in the foreground. So there's a lot of different variables going on here, all while the light is changing pretty quickly. All right. So again, I've got the Luxleys pretty much where I want them now. And yes, I am going to have to clone these puppies out of here in post-processing. And I was, aware of that from the very beginning. They're in the background. They're small. It's going to be easy to do. So now what I'm doing here is I've moved these lights. They look different on the hay bales. And I'm trying again to mimic the look of the LED lights with my flashlight. So I need to do a practice a little bit more. Exposure's gotten another second longer. It's another couple minutes later. The mosquitoes are getting hungrier and hungrier, and the bats are not doing their job, eating enough of them fast enough. Okay, again, moved the Luxley lights again. I moved them more frontal and further away. I'm just making adjustments, trying to get these things to look the way I wanted them to, having lots of options to work with later on. So you can see, obviously, no light on the foreground as I make yet another adjustment to the background lights. Now I've got to compensate and readjust my flashlight painting to get that again to match what I'm doing with the grids. 4 minutes later, we got a car going through the background. Exposure's getting longer still. I think we've gone from 6 seconds to 10 seconds. So it's continuous, still getting dark. Confession right now, I had intended to stay out in the field and do this with full-on moonlight and get, full moon shadows on these hay bales. But the damn bugs were just so ferocious, I couldn't take it anymore. I'm the only thing that wasn't covered were my hands. And I'd reach up to adjust the Luxley light, and I'd see like 5 or 6 mosquitoes on my hand at one time. It was really awful. Anyway, I guess I'm just making excuses for a less than perfect photograph here. Either that or it's a good story. Okay, again, making an adjustment with the flashlight here. And I also decided to try putting a little, you can see my flashlight right here. I ran into the field in my 10-second exposure and lit both of these hay bales plus, I only got to the one in the back. You can see that's brighter than this one in the foreground. It's a little more intense. Plus lighting the foreground hay bale from the left-hand side. Um, I figured the more I was moving, the less the mosquitoes would get to me. So yeah, we're getting there. We're getting really close. It's 10 seconds. It's 9:20. It's still getting dark. And now, okay. So now I've got the light the way I want it. This is just with the Luxleys. The two Luxleys are in their final position. And I just need to get the flashlight the way I want. So now it's almost frontal on the hay bale in the foreground, raking across. Very subtle lighting on the left from the left side. I think I wanted to get a little bit more than that. So yeah, that's where we did, and the final ended up being 30 seconds at 9:28, and that was about all I could take. So as you can see, I ended up here making yet another change, and I moved those darn Luxley lights around to the left-hand side. After all, in hopes of getting the moonlight coming in from the right. Lighting the shadow section of an image is important too. You generally don't want to compete with your primary ambient light source, whether it's a moonlight or sunlight or whatever. So you're typically lighting the shadow side. That's what I eventually did at the very last minute here, and just put a little bit of catch light on the right side of the hay bales. So in this 30-second image, I had time now to go and hit all three of the hay bales from the right-hand side with the flashlight. On this one, it's just the foreground one. And then, oh no, that's the one with flashlight on all three hay bales on the right-hand side, behind and to the right, as well as the foreground on the left-hand side is also lit with a flashlight. And then there's one alternate version here without the flashlight on the hay bales in the background. So let's see, you can see here and here it's dark. Here I've got my flashlight. And if we go back to the previous version, it's lit up here. So I ran out into the field and I lit from, let's pick a nice other color. I lit from pretty close to straight on, maybe like here, whoops. And here I'm in the frame, shining a flashlight on the ends of the hay bales. The Luxleys are doing their job here and here. And this is flashlight here from out of the frame on the left, and flashlight there from out of the frame on the right. And that's without the added flashlight on the back. So I got my exercise. I was able to, there's maybe like 30 yards or so, 25 or 30 yards between the near and the far hay bale, running through the squishy, boggy ground to escape the terrorist mosquitoes. Normally, I probably would have just put the third Luxley on the hay bale to make, especially in these difficult conditions. But I wanted to be able to demonstrate the whole process with both flashlight and with the LEDs. What I also didn't mention is that there's mist forming in the field and condensation on everything. My tripod, my camera, everything was dripping wet at this point. So, all right. Here's where we started from 8:36 to 9:28, the better part of an hour to get from that, initial image to the final image. A lot of running around, a lot of technical challenges. I don't know. A lot of people who aren't accustomed to doing night photography and working this way say, you spent a whole hour doing that shot? Really? Really? Yeah. But, that's just the way I roll, I guess. Is this a shot that I'm going to put in a portfolio? No, probably not. But I hope that it was relatively good at demonstrating the process and the techniques that I use to get from the image on the left to the image on the right. If I wanted it to be subtle and natural and realistic, I could have just done a later Twilight shot without any added light painting and been done with it. But I enjoy the process and I enjoy the look of theatrical lighting of my images. So that is the last slide in this long presentation. Well, second to last slide. Just kind of a closure here. I'm just going to read from the slide for you because I think that this kind of sums it up here. Light painting at twilight is essentially the same as light painting in full darkness, with the added challenge of quickly changing ambient light intensity and color. It's important to remember that both the brightness or the intensity of the light and the color is changing throughout the twilight period. And this is my mentor and friend Steve, leaning on his rock in 2016 up there in Yosemite. Miss that guy. He taught me so much. I learned so much from him. And I think in a large way, he's responsible for me being able to make a career out of being a photographer, and specifically a night photographer. So this is lit with an old school incandescent flashlight. He's not 100% sharp because this is I think this was like a 3 or 4 second exposure lit with a flashlight. Probably should have used a flash on him, but that wasn't what I had in hand. I'm so glad I got to make this portrait of him before he passed away. Just such a special human being. Anyway, thank you all so very much for being here today. I will certainly stick around and be glad to answer any questions as we've got. But I wanted just to mention again that both Matt and I are partners in National Parks at Night. We do night photography workshops and adventure tours and international tours to exciting locations all around the world, including lots and lots of national parks, both U.S. and abroad. We hope that you will sign up for our email list, and if you do so soon, you should do so soon, because we are getting ready to announce our 10th season of workshops. Late August, early September, don't have an exact date yet. We always, as a perk to our workshop alumni, we give them first dibs on our workshops and open up a few days ahead of time to people, our workshop alumni, people who have taken trips with us in the past. And then a few days later, we'll open up to our mailing list, which you can be on to get a good shot at being on the trips that you'd like to go on. And then finally, after that, a week after that, we do a public launch. But you'll get a better chance of getting into the workshop you might want to do if you sign up for our mailing list. Now, National Parks at Night also produces 2 night photography conferences, one of which happens to be coming up in September in Kanab, Utah. You're going, right, Matt?
Yeah, I'm going. I'm trying to get the screen to show up.
Well, it's the Nightscaper Conference. It's an in-person conference. We'll have about somewhere between 15 and 20 speakers, a couple of hundred attendees, daytime sessions on all kinds of topics related to night photography, astronomy, and the science of both of those. There are daytime sessions, hour-long daytime sessions from all the speakers, and then star parties, telescopes, going out and photographing at night as well. We have sponsors who will be there with their products. So it's a good time. This concert,
Including Novoflex.
Hey, there we go. Thank you, Novoflex. this is the fourth Nightscaper conference, Matt.
The fourth Nightscaper conference. Yep.
The second one was virtual due to the pandemic, but yeah. And then after that, in the wintertime, usually the first weekend in February, sometimes the last weekend in January, like next year, is the Night Photo Summit. That is a similar conference, except it's all virtual, 3 days long. We've got many more speakers for this one. It's super fun, and it's just so. I love this Night Photo Summit conference because we've got speakers from all over the world talking about all different things related to the night, and it's just a super fun, jam-filled weekend. So social channels up there. You can follow them. I don't do social myself, so that's why you'll not see my own channels up there. But please follow National Parks at Night, Nightscaper, Night Photo Summit, and at Matt Hill Art.
Huh.
Is that you?
That's me.
All right.
Did I do that?
Do we have some questions, Matt?
Oh, we do. Yeah,
Okay.
I have a question for you first, actually.
Okay, Doug.
What tripod are you using lately?
Huh. Well, funny you should ask. I just happen to have one right here.
Yeah.
So I am using the NovoFlex Trio Balance, the 3-section leg tripod, and I like this because it's bloody tall. It's really tall. The downside is I've got to take it apart to fit it in my suitcase, and I travel a lot. But I love the fact that without using a center column, I can get, well over 5 feet and probably close to 6 feet tall. The built-in leveling base means that I don't have to have a separate leveling base for doing panos, which is awesome. And what I've got here, I've got an Acrotech GPS ball head on here with come on. Fail. I was going to say, I've got the quick release on here, but I've got it on here so tight that I can't get it done. There we go. Yeah. So I've got the quick release on here with.
It's hard to do with,
it's hard
sometimes.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So just a quick release plate on the bottom, on top of the Trio Balance here that allows me to quickly change from one head to the next, or just take the head off to put it in my suitcase.
Nice.
It's really a lot easier than that, but failure under pressure.
Also, my daily use tripod. I love the Trio Balance.
Yeah. Eventually, I'd like to get the 4-section legs. So if I'm carrying a smaller suitcase, be able to not disassemble the whole thing to put it in a suitcase. But I just love the fact that I can get about 6 feet tall without a center column. It's just a super stable tripod.
Right. For those of you who may not be familiar, you can remove all 3 legs from all of the NovoFlex tripods, which when he says disassemble it,
that I can do without failing.
It's not just taking one off to be a monopod.
Yeah.
It's like you can fit the whole thing in a suitcase instead of having to turn it diagonally. So pretty awesome. Very awesome. Yeah. So that was my question. Now let's move on to more important questions. The first one came from Jay Jeffries regarding when you were doing the shadow casting at the very beginning of the presentation.
Yeah.
How did you get the shadows so sharp?
Just moving back and forth. I had to adjust the model's position, which was somewhat limited because she had to be on stable ground so she could do that balancing pose. And then I moved back and forth with the flashlight. So I'm pretty sure that was a Coast HP7, our kind of old classic zoomable, very powerful, bright flashlight. Mm-hmm. Zoomed all the way out to spot beam. And I just moved back and forth. And you can try this yourself with your hand, a flashlight, and the wall. And change the relationship of the hand, the flashlight, and the wall until you get to the sweet spot where it'll come into focus.
Nice.
And also you change, further away with the flashlight is also going to change the size of the shadow as well.
But how long was the flashlight on also?
Oh boy, you got me there.
Was it like a quick pulse, or did you leave it on for 5 seconds?
It was probably a second or so. It wasn't a super quick pop, but it certainly was not for the duration of the exposure.
Right, because she was pretty far away from that 150-foot tall rock, right?
Yeah. And it's a bright flashlight, and it's zoomed into spot mode as well.
Right.
And she was also, a yoga practitioner, so she was rock steady too.
Oh, to be a yogi. All right, Suzanne asked, curious to know what NPen Guy's current favorite flashlights are.
I'm so glad you asked, Suzanne. I have two, and perhaps to your surprise, they are not Coast flashlights. This is the Lead Lenser PR6 Work. The work designation is important. It has, I think, 6 different settings, but the brilliance of this flashlight is it is programmable so that you can use 2 of them. Pick your favorite 2, and for me, that's the brightest and the dimmest. It also has a twist zoom head, and very importantly, it has a high CRI, or color rendering index, of 90 and a color temperature of 4,300 Kelvin, which is very close to moonlight. So love this flashlight. Another cool thing about it is that the low setting is still a little bit bright for most purposes. But it does, look at that. You can take off the head. There's the LED. And I just so happen to have right here a little cutout piece of neutral density, which fits in there and
Genius.
goes back on. So there you go. It just got a stop dimmer, and I could put, 2, 3, 4 pieces in there, however much I need to dim this flashlight down. So that's the Lead Lenser PR6 Work. And this one is also a Lead Lenser light. And I just want to make sure I get the right model number. This is the P2R Work. Oh, this is P6R, not PR6, but P6R Work. This is the P2R Work. Compact little flashlight. These are both of these are rechargeable, of course, so you don't need disposable batteries. This one has a twist to zoom head. It has 2 brightness levels, and the low brightness level is 15 lumens. So it's quite dim. It's still a little bit brighter than what I want to use for Milky Way type work. This one, unfortunately, you cannot take the head off and put the neutral density in there. So it's super compact. Look at the size of these things together. This is a really small light. It gives you a lot of bang for your buck. It's also 4,300K. I think this one is slightly lower CRI, so the color rendering index or the quality of the light is not quite as clean. But for the size and the cost of it, I think this is like a $25 or $30 light. It really gives you a lot of bang for the buck. It's zoomable. It's got the color temperature that we want, and it fits in your pocket, and it's rechargeable.
Thanks, Lance.
Yeah.
I got one more question. And I already was speaking with Alan about this in the chat, but he said, what are some things we can do to minimize our light pollution outdoors? He continues, I've had complaints from nearby astrophotographers shooting deep space and park rangers.
Well, for one, acclimate your eyes to the environment where you're working, for sure. So get to the point, and with the caveat of being safe. So don't walk around with a headlight, for sure. Number one, that the headlights will spoil everybody's photographs and draw attention to yourself. Oh man, there was a time lapse video at Delicate Arch from somebody made a couple years ago of a workshop of photographers photographing at night, and it was just a time lapse of like 15 headlights and flashlights all zooming around, and I see Alan's point completely, and that's probably why there's no more light painting at Arches. Yeah, maybe they saw that video. So if you do use a light to get around, use a very dim light, point it at the ground where you're stepping and not out in front of you. Don't use a bright flashlight to see what's in front of you. Take test exposures. So besides standing there waving a flashlight around at the scene in front of you, again, it's going to look like on-camera flash, so it's not going to be flattering. It's not going to be helpful. Just make test exposures. Use light minimally, and if you are in an environment where there are other people who are going to be bothered, LED light panels are a great option because, again, if you're working under starlight, 0.1% brightness is barely perceptible to our eyes, but works really, magical wonders for our high ISO sensitivity cameras.
Right. And some of these LED panels that are even like up to when you're at 20% brightness, it's still no more than like a first quarter moon. Right. That's one of the other things to keep in mind. Now, you don't want to get into an argument with a park ranger about that or an astro group. I'm just going to add one thing to what Lance said. You might think a red headlamp or red light is the way to go. And if you're a straight astro photographer, you're absolutely right. But if you're taking photographs of the landscape, if you're doing astro-landscape photography, you don't want to use a red light because although it preserves your night vision, it is insidious in that it spills out into places where you wouldn't expect and you might not be able to see, but it's really hard to remove from a photograph.
Yeah, and I'll add on top of that, even the little red light on the back of your Canon camera that indicates you're exposing, or the little red light on your intervalometer dangling from your tripod can light up the ground and spoil your photograph or anybody else in close proximity. So
as our eyes age, it's harder to see, but it's more important to be careful that you're not blasting so much light that other people's a good experience is affected negatively.
I'm not sure if I have this right here. I'll be right back. Really right back.
I'm going to give one suggestion while Lance is gone. Let's say you have a flashlight and you turn on this flashlight and I turn on the flashlight here. Like it has light coming out the end and it has a spread to it, right? What I recommend to people is that you take the end of your hand and just sort of wrap it around the end like this, and then use the end of your hand to make a little bit of room for just a little bit of light to spill out. So you're going to make your own sort of foil like this, your own way to choose how much light spills out. And you see that little bit on my hand there. This is what I do to not annoy other people and to be very laser focused about where I'm placing light. So if you learn how to make your hand be clever in creating shapes, that just let a little bit of light out on the end instead of all the light, you're going to help a lot of people, including yourself.
Okay. Awesome advice, Matt. I want to put in a plug for one more flashlight here. And this also will speak to Alan's concerns as well. This tiny little bugger right here is the Night Core tube light. And although that looks really bright, it's 1 lumen. 1 lumen. So this little guy with a lanyard around your neck is perfect for adjusting your camera without disturbing your neighbors. And in a starlight situation, if you hold it down, at waist level while you're walking around, it's enough to see the ground in front of you without really being noticeable by anyone else. It's $10. It's USB-C rechargeable. The lanyard is from something else. It didn't come with the lanyard, but it does have a little loop that comes with it. So I know a couple of us at National Parks at Night got these recently, and it's like, how did I ever live without this thing? Because it's.
I just added one to my cart.
Well, Gabe is working with them to try to get us a deal, so we'll see how it goes. But
all of the flashlights Lance has mentioned are in the chat for those of you who are looking for URLs. If you're watching this on the replay, I'll make sure that they get posted in the description on YouTube.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Let's see if we have any other questions. It's nice talking about the tools, right? And I'll just go back to the first question I asked Lance. Why did I ask him which tripod he's using? Because you can't do any of this without your camera being stable. So sometimes we don't talk about the things that we rely on. And once you find a tripod, that you kind of forget about because it always works and it works the way you want. That's why I choose novoflex. And I'm not going to put words in Lance's mouth, but that's why I choose it.
Well, if I turn the camera around in the corner of this room over here, you would see a pile of tripods getting dusty. And they all have their pluses and minuses, but since I got the novoflex, that's the only one that I'm using.
Awesome.
For sure.
Sweet. Well, I don't see any new questions. And if anybody else has more questions, we'd be happy to answer them after the webinar is over. Feel free to hit reply to the invite that you got. Somebody will get that, and we'll make sure we get back to you. Or if you're watching the replay, you can do that on YouTube, and we'll make sure that you get a response on YouTube. So I guess we're coming in for a landing here, Lance. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Well, I'd just like to say thank you to everyone for sticking around on the middle of a summer afternoon. I'm sure there's lots of other more exciting and fun things to do, but thank you very much for your attention this afternoon. I hope you enjoyed this and found this useful and helpful. And get out there and seize the night. And don't forget to sign up for National Parks at Night's mailing list for our upcoming season of workshops.
Right. I will put that link in. I didn't put that one in of all the links.
Of all the links.
Yeah. Doing that right now. Okay. So thank you, Martin and Brenda, for hosting, this novoflex webinar series and believing in it. Thanks for giving us the opportunity to share our craft with you. And we hope that you have wonderful, successful nights under the stars or under the moon. We're going to wrap this up and say thank you all for coming. And we hope to see you again the next time. Thanks, Lance, for being here. I really appreciate you, man. Love learning from you.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Otherwise, have a great day. Get out there and happy shooting. We'll see you around.
Bye-bye. Thanks again.